So hello friends, hope you all doing well. So today here in this video we'll discuss about the TMJ or temporomandibular joint. TMJ or temporomandibular joint. So temporomandibular joint, the temporomandibular joint on each side of the head is formed by the articulation between the articular eminence and the anterior part of the glenoid fossa. You can feel the TMJ near the ear, so eminence and articular eminence and anterior part of the glenoid fossa of temporal bone above the condylar head of the mandible below, it's a and the TMJ is a synovial joint. TMJ, it's a synovial joint, and on each side of the head it's formed by the articulation between the between the articular eminence and the anterior part of glenoid fossa of temporal bone. It formed by the articulation of head of the formed by the articulation by the formed by the articulation between the articular eminence articular eminence between the articular eminence and anterior part of glenoid fossa. Anterior part of glenoid fossa. Anterior part of glenoid fossa of temporal bone. Glenoid fossa of temporal bone above the condylar head of the mandible below, and it's a synovial joint. I've told you before that it's a synovial joint. So let's draw a TMJ. So this is the TMJ. This is the TMJ, and this is the tympanic palate. Tympanic palate, and this is mandibular fossa. Here will be mandibular fossa, and mandibular fossa. Here will be articular tubercle. Here it will be articular tubercle. Here it will be articular tubercle, and this is articular disc. This is articular disc. This is the head of the mandible. This is the head of the mandible, and this is tympanic bone. This is articular disc. Here is the articular tubercle. This is mandibular fossa, tympanic palate, and this is TMJ. This is the TMJ. So now let's talk about the different parts of the TMJ. and different parts of the tubercle TMJ. Now let's talk about the different parts of TMJ. So at first, the body bone structure. Bony structure. At first, the bony structure, the condyle of the mandible. The condyle of the mandible is composed of cancellous bone. The condyle of the mandible is composed of cancellous bone and covered by the thin layer of compact bone. And the roof of the glenoid fossa is consists of their compact layer of bone, and the articular eminence consists of spongy bone covered by a thin layer of compact bone. So this is the bony structure of the TMJ. So at first, the condyle of the mandible. The condyle of the mandible is composed of cancellous bone covered by a thin layer of compact bone. And number two, that is the roof of glenoid fossa. The roof of the glenoid fossa, and the uh, uh, roof of the glenoid fossa consists of their compact layer of bone, and the articular eminence consists of spongy bone covered by a thin layer of compact bone. And number two, that is articular fibrous covering. Articular fibrous covering. So the fibrous covering of mandibular condyle is thick and consists strong collagen fibers is in superficial layer. The fibrous layer covering the articulating surface of temporal bone is thin in glenoid fossa and thickens on the articular eminence. So the articular disc the TMJ contains fibrous articular disc that is found between the articular surface. This is the articular disc found between the articular surface. Its function as a shock absorber. This main function of articular disc is act as a shock absorber, and the disc is biconcave. And number three, that is synovial membrane. Synovial membrane. The articular capsule is linked by a synovial membrane. And the link is by a synovial membrane. The synovial membrane form of folds. This synovial membrane form folds to form the synovial villi that projecting into the joint spaces. And the synovial membrane contains internal cells, and the small amount of clear straw-colored vascular fluid is found in the articular space. Here in the articular space, you can find a small amount of clear straw-colored vascular fluid. So now talk about the capsular ligament of the TMJ. Capsular ligament. Now let's talk about the capsular ligament of the TMJ. The joint capsule covered the TMJ. The joint capsule cover the TMJ, and the joint capsule is a fibrous elastic sac. It's a fibrous elastic sac attached of fibroelastic sac, that is anteriorly it's covered by a attached to the ascending slope of articular eminence. Anteriorly it's covered by a slope of uh, articular eminence, ascending slope of eminence, and posteriorly it's covered by a to the tip of the scapulotympanic fissure, and the superiorly it's covered by margins of the clinoid fossa, and interiorly to the neck of condyle of mandible, anteriorly to the neck of the condyle of mandible, and the posterior capsule is highly vascular, and sometimes it calls the polypus vesiculosa also, and the parotid gland is usually found in the and the parotid gland is usually found on the post capsule of joint. So now let's talk about the applied anatomy of TMJ. So now we'll talk about the applied anatomy of the mandible. So during the excessive number one, that is dislocation of mandible. So dislocation of mandible. So during the excessive opening, so during the excessive opening of the mouth, or during the convulsion, the head of the mandible, one or the both side may be sleepy. The head of the mandible may be sleepy. This is the head of the mandible. This area may be sleepy. So results of this, mandible close to the mouth, and inability to close the mouth. So mandible dislocated and sleep dislocated. For this cause, there will be inability to close the mouth. And number two, that is dearrangements of articular disc. Dearrangements of articular disc. So it's maybe from any injury, just like many injury, likely overclosure or malocclusion, which cause the clicking and pain during this movement of the jaw. There will be clicking sound and pain during the movement of the jaw. So this is called dearrangements of the this is from the dearrangements of the articular disc, and it may be from any cause like injury, overclosure or malocclusion, and it causes clicking and pain during the movement of jaw. And number three, that is in the time of operation on joint, the 7 cranial nerves should be preserved with care. During the operation, 7 cranial should be preserved with care. So this was the applied anatomy of the TMJ.